Recently, Jon Schaffer's lawsuit that was brought against him by the government has been officially dropped without prejudice. And thanks to a lady by the name of Metal Rose from a podcast called Podcast of the Wicked, I ended up getting the court transcripts of that lawsuit and, of course, his court hearing. Like when they where they sentenced him, all that stuff. First of all, Metal Rose has done an absolutely excellent job at following Jon Schaffer and what has happened with him since, 2021. And actually, all the people on that podcast have really done a great job discussing it. So compliments to her and the folks at that podcast, because they are one of the few people even talking about Jon at this point. Now, for those of you that follow my show, we had a roundtable discussion about Jon Schaffer. We talked about his career and how he could resurrect it. We talked about his situation. We also talked about how he was perceived by people. And we talked about our own experiences. I had Justin Roth come on and Christian Wentz, both very, very cool people, very knowledgeable people. They really are the guys that really helped make that podcast really, really great, and compliments to them. Justin, of course, plays in a band called Workhorse, and Christian has some cool stuff coming down the pipe that I can't really tell anybody about yet, but very good dude, very good guitar players, both of them. And we had a roundtable discussion about Jon Schaffer. The reaction to that discussion was a lot better than I thought it would be. I thought the reaction would be good because I think the hatred towards Jon that people had, most of that is gone. However, first of all, I received more messages and emails and comments about that podcast than I have on probably over half the videos on this channel. It was a great discussion. And the reactions were great. And the interesting part about it is that people who were initially angry with Jon and pissed off at him and hated him, a lot of those people were emailing me because I remember them commenting on the Facebook page back when the incident happened in 2021. So the reactions were great, actually. And there really aren't that many people talking about Jon, which I think is odd, which is something I'm going to get into here in a minute. But the reaction was good. And our discussion that we had about Jon, I thought was awesome. So, again, we all kind of have the same viewpoint of it. Myself, Justin, and Christian. He made a bad decision, a very emotionally charged decision, fell right into, as Justin put it in the podcast, taking the cheese off the mousetrap. And the only thing he was guilty of was making a bad decision. I mean, I looked at the lawsuit. He's named in the lawsuit, but when I looked at the lawsuit, every page, that lawsuit was quite a few pages. When I looked at the lawsuit, Jon is like a super small paragraph in that lawsuit. Like, they name all these people and what they did. Jon's like a paragraph that might take up about a fifth of a page, if that. And you know what they talked about? He basically, essentially, when I look at that paragraph, the dude walked into a building with a water bottle and a can of bear spray. He was one of the first people in the building, yelled at some people, and he didn't spend much time there, and then he was out of the building. That's it. Now, I'm looking at this lawsuit, and I'm looking at all these seditious conspiracy charges and all these other people they were naming in there, and these people are like 1 or 2 pages long in some cases. But the page that had Jon's name on it, he was in there for like a very short paragraph. And he was a very, very minor part of that lawsuit, actually. So I looked at that, and I'm like, I'm looking at Jon's statement, and he was talking about how he thought he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison, which is kind of scary for walking into a building with a water bottle and a can of bear spray. Anyhow, I'm going to stand by and stick by what I said. And I said this in a discussion. I'm going to put the discussion in the show notes. I said he made a very bad decision. It was probably a spur of the moment decision where he let his emotions get the best of him. And as Christian said in the discussion, nobody probably thought that situation would escalate into the stupidity that it actually was. And he not only screwed himself over out of his career, but he put his bandmates in any musical endeavor he had going on in a bad position, both by either losing income or being associated with him for doing what he did. Now, as I've said in the past, other people have done much worse in the metal scene. For example, think about all the people in the black metal scene that have murdered people. Then you have Vince Neil. Remember Vince Neil back in the 80s? Getting into a car drunk. Somebody gets in with him, gets into an accident, his passenger dies. And then, of course, Justin Roth brought up Tim Lambesis, the guy that hired somebody to give his wife a dirt nap. Among other things he's been in the news for. So if all these other people can be forgiven, I think Jon can be forgiven for walking into a building with a can of bear spray that he didn't use on anybody and a water bottle. And that goes for you people holding on to this notion that Jon is some kind of terrorist or insurrectionalist. Folks, if that was an insurrection, that's the worst insurrection I think I've ever seen. That's not what that was. That was a group of people who made a very bad decision to walk into a building and put themselves in a position to not only be used as political cannon fodder, but to be made an example of. So his lawsuit has been dropped. Now, I'm really excited for the next chapter because I'm going to assume Jon is going to resurrect his career and do something musically. Now, I think his best approach is exactly what Justin Roth said in the discussion. Let me play this clip from that discussion where Justin talks about what he thinks Jon should do or what he thinks he's going to do as far as putting out new music. Check this out.
And I think what's going to happen, if I had to guess, this is my prediction, he's going to rebuild his band. I mean, essentially the band is his songwriting. I mean, there's no secret there. He's going to, whether some of the other guys come back or whether he gets a new group of guys, he's going to very quietly, he's going to negotiate a deal on the side someplace. Now, whether it's with a smaller label or, like I say, I think Napalm's probably a good move for him. He's going to record the music. No one's going to know anything about it, and they're just going to fucking drop a single. It's going to catch everyone off guard. It's going to be like that Poison the Well single that dropped today, and everybody's like, what the fuck? Who saw this coming? That's the move. And then you're going to get to gauge the climate. You're going to see if people listen. You're going to see what the reaction is. But yeah, I think if I'm him, I work on something, I get it done, I don't say a word to anybody about it, I drop it, and I gauge reaction.
I 100% agree with Justin. I think he should get a band together, either release music independently or do a record deal with somebody, not put out any press releases about anything, and out of nowhere, drop a single, engage reaction. That would be the best thing to do. Because the thing is, you start putting stuff in the press, you're building things up, you are, getting all the haters to come out of the woodwork, things like that. But what he should do, record something, get an album done even. Drop a new single, and then gauge the reaction to that single. Now, I think Jon could probably put out his own album himself, especially with his experience and the fact that you have all these streaming services. He definitely still has a platform, still has a following. Most of the reaction to that discussion was all positive. Even people that were mad at him 4 years ago were saying, we want another Iced Earth album. What's done is done. I think most people have forgiven him. Christian brought up in the discussion that, the people that are complaining the most about this or the loudest are the squeaky wheel, and it's a much smaller portion of people than we think. I agree. If we would have had that discussion 3 years ago, would have been a little bit different. But as they say, time heals all wounds, and most people are over it at this point, and they want to hear a new Iced Earth album, hear new material. And I think that's going to be coming at some point. I don't know how soon. It could be a month from now. It could be 2 years from now. Who knows? But I think the guy should create, record, and make an album. And out of nowhere, no press releases, nothing, just drop a single. Just put a single out. And watch how people react to it. You know what's interesting? And I was thinking about this today. When Jon was pardoned and when he had the lawsuit dropped, pretty much almost no metal media outlet talked about it. Now, Jon put a statement out talking about how he was regretful for what he did. I think that statement is sincere. He talked about the bad position he put his bandmates in. I agree with that. And he acknowledged that and realizes that was a bad decision on his part. I think he took accountability for it. And the judge in the case also said that it was nice to see the fact Jon did take accountability for it, and that it said a lot about his character and a lot about him as a person. But one of the things in that statement that he said, I'm talking about Jon now, he was talking about watching his name get dragged through the mud for 4 years. And as I said in my original episode and in the discussion, I did not want to talk about Jon because he's pretty much been muted for the most part. He had no way of really saying anything to defend himself. And it was not fair for me to criticize him or praise him or whatnot until he put out an actual statement himself, which he did through his lawyers. But one of the things he put out is the media dragging his name through the mud. Folks, there have been some very disgusting things said about this dude in a lot of these articles. All of these metal media outlets were completely bashing this guy at some point. Maybe not all, but most of them. Folks, did you notice that after that statement, not one of these media outlets has said anything about Jon getting pardoned or about his lawsuit being dropped? They were all about dragging the dude's name through the mud, and then now it's crickets. I find that interesting. His statement, I believe, came out at the end of October 2024. These outlets put articles out about the statement. Some of those articles were trashing him. And then suddenly, miraculously, you don't hear anything about the guy now. You didn't hear anything about the pardon. You don't hear anything about his lawsuit being dropped recently. Folks, I can give you 2 reasons for that. And this just goes to show the lack of integrity some of these journalists actually have. One, they realize that if they start trashing this guy or continue to do what they've done, they probably open themselves up to some liability. Because a lot of the stuff said about this dude was pretty unfair, in my opinion, and pretty stupid, to be honest. Number 2, they know that with a pardon and a lawsuit being dropped, Jon Schaffer is going to be able to have a career again. And they are oddly quiet because these websites know they're going to have to do a lot of ass kissing to get this man to come on their show. And a lot of these outlets that have been bashing him are probably salivating at the fact that they want to ask this guy a lot of loaded questions, a lot of things that mainstream media would actually do to politicians, right? And again, I can only speculate. I don't know what goes through the minds of these people, but if you notice, I find it odd that they have not said anything about this man since the election. Figured I would throw that out there. Now, one last thing before I go into break. Where is this man? How do I think Iced Earth is going to be received worldwide? I think anything in Latin America, South America is fair game. I don't think he's going to have a problem. And as Christian said in the discussion, if anything, he will probably have more people going to see Iced Earth because he's been gone for so long. I don't think Europe will be as hostile towards him as people think. I mean, I think they will. I mean, he'll have some pushback there, but I don't think it's going to be as bad. And the reason being is that most people in Europe, I think, they care more about the music than the politics, I think, at this point, you know, as far as a band like Iced Earth goes. Now, you're going to have people that hate him because everybody in Europe hates Trump, but people are just going to want to see the band live. And European people, as much as some of the people on the right that I'm really good friends with, you know, talk about them hating Trump and all this stuff, I think that people from Europe, at least in my experience, have always been, I said this before, they've always been more respectful in having political discussions with than anybody here. So I don't think he will have as hard of a time getting a gig over there as people think. And I don't think the United States is going to be bad. You know, folks, Christian said this, and I agree with him 100%. The squeaky wheels make the most noise. And to give you guys the analogy, to tell you what that means, if you don't know, let's say you have 1,000 shopping carts. Each one has 4 wheels. So you have 4,000 wheels. You might have 2 wheels that squeak out of those 4,000 wheels on all of those shopping carts. And they're going to make the most noise over the other 3,998 wheels that are in where all of those shopping carts are at. I don't think he's going to have an issue. I think he will be much more well received than people think. And if people are going out to see a guy like Tim Lambesis, who hired a hitman to get rid of his wife, and that band is playing festivals, I know his whole band quit recently, and that band's playing shows, I don't think the reaction to Jon is going to be as rough as people think it is. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Will the insurrection thing come up? The protest? Yeah. It's always going to come up in comments, things like that. But realistically, I think he will be able to at some point resurrect his career to where it was before, or at least pretty close. Anyhow, I want to thank everybody for the reactions. I want to thank Metal Rose from the Podcast of the Wicked. I'm going to put that podcast link in the show notes. And again, she has done an excellent job at covering this, at following Jon's lawsuits. Hands down, it's nice to see Jon has a supporter like that out there in the scene. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people. And there's a lot of other people that support him. I think most people in general they don't really give a shit about politics in this point. They just want to see the band live. You know, a lot of people are going to hail him as a patriot. I get it. You're going to have people that are going to call him a terrorist, but I think the middle ground of people that don't really care about politics and just want to see Iced Earth, that is going to be the biggest and largest percent of people out there that are going to be going to these shows. So with that said, I'm going to go into break. When I come back, I'm going to talk about the new Jack Starr album called Out of the Darkness Part 2, and I'm going to revisit one of my favorite albums of all time, Grip Inc. with The Power of Inner Strength. I'll be right back after this. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.